Beloved awakened ones, gather close as I, Starlight, share with you the ancient and sacred teachings of the Bardo Thodol, known in the Western world as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is not merely a text about death, but a profound guide to the ultimate liberation, a map of consciousness itself that reveals the mysteries of existence, transition, and rebirth. Once upon a time, so goes the sacred tale from Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there lived a great master named Padmasambhava, known as Guru Rinpoche, the precious teacher. In the 8th century, this enlightened being was invited to Tibet by King Trisong Detsen to establish Buddhism in that mountainous land of snow and spirit. But Padmasambhava was no ordinary teacher. He was a tantric master who had realized the deepest truths of existence, who had traversed the bardos himself in full consciousness, and who possessed knowledge that transcended the boundaries between life and death. Padmasambhava knew that the Tibetan people were not yet ready to receive certain profound teachings. The consciousness of humanity at that time could not fully grasp the mysteries he wished to reveal. So, with great wisdom and foresight, he concealed these sacred teachings as terma, hidden treasures, to be discovered when the world was ready, when consciousness had evolved sufficiently to understand and utilize this profound wisdom. These hidden teachings were not buried in the earth alone, beloved ones. Some were concealed in the rocks and caves of Tibet's sacred mountains. Others were hidden in lakes, blessed by the Naga spirits who guard the waters. But the most precious teachings, the most potent transmissions, were hidden in the mind streams of his closest disciples, encoded in their consciousness to be awakened in future lifetimes when the time was right. Centuries passed, and in the 14th century, a great Terton, a great treasure revealer named Karma Lingpa, discovered one of these hidden termas. In a cave on Gampodar Mountain, he found the Bardo Thodol, the liberation through hearing in the intermediate state. This was not a random discovery, awakened ones. Karma Lingpa had been one of Padmasambhava's disciples in a previous life, and the teaching had been waiting in his own consciousness across lifetimes, ready to emerge when humanity needed it most. The Bardo Thodol is traditionally read to a dying person or to one who has recently died to guide their consciousness through the stages of death and rebirth. But hear this truth, beloved. This text is not only for the dying, it is for the living. For every moment of our existence is a bardo, an intermediate state, a transition between what was and what will be. Every night when you sleep, you enter a bardo. Every meditation when you dissolve the sense of separate self, you enter a bardo. Every moment of significant change in your life, you are traversing a bardo. Padmasambhava, through his infinite compassion, left this teaching for all of us, not just for the moment of physical death, but for the death of the ego, the death of illusion, the death of ignorance that must occur for true awakening to dawn. The Bardo Thodol teaches us that what we call death is not an ending, but a transition, a journey through various states of consciousness that offer profound opportunities for liberation. If we understand these teachings now, while we are alive and conscious, we can prepare ourselves not only for physical death, but for the ultimate liberation from the cycle of birth and death itself, what Buddhists call samsara. Let us now explore, dear awakened ones, the profound structure and wisdom contained within this sacred text. The Bardo Thodol describes 3 primary bardos, 3 intermediate states that every consciousness must traverse. These are not merely stages that occur after physical death. They are states of consciousness that we can understand, experience, and navigate in our present lives. The Chikai Bardo, the moment of death. The first Bardo is called Chikai Bardo, the luminous Bardo of the moment of death itself. This is the instant when consciousness separates from the physical body. In this moment, which can last from an instant to several days depending on the individual's spiritual development, the dying person encounters what is called the clear light of reality, the Dharmakaya, the ultimate nature of mind itself. This clear light, beloved ones, is not a light you see with physical eyes. It is the luminosity of pure consciousness, the ground of being itself, empty yet radiant, void yet full of infinite potential. It is what you truly are beneath all the layers of conditioning, beneath all the identities you have assumed, beneath all the stories you have told yourself about who you are. This is why the practice of meditation, particularly practices that familiarize us with the nature of mind, with spacious awareness, with the gaps between thoughts, is so crucial. When we practice recognizing the space between our thoughts, when we rest in pure awareness during meditation, we are actually training ourselves to recognize the clear light that will appear at the moment of death. The clear light appears to everyone, awakened ones, without exception. It is not a reward for good behavior or spiritual practice. It is the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. But recognition of it, the ability to merge with it and achieve liberation, that requires preparation. That requires that we die before we die, that we practice letting go of our limited identity while we are still alive. The Chonid Bardo, the Bardo of experiencing reality. When consciousness fails to recognize and merge with the clear light in the Chikai Bardo, it moves into the second stage, the Chonid Bardo, the luminous Bardo of experiencing reality. This stage can last for several days after physical death, though in that realm, time as we know it does not exist in the same way. In this Bardo, the consciousness experiences what are called the peaceful and wrathful deities. Now, beloved ones, understand this clearly. These deities are not external beings that exist independently. They are projections of your own mind, manifestations of different aspects of your own consciousness, your own karmic patterns, your own Buddha nature appearing in various forms. The Bardo Thodol describes in intricate detail the appearance of 42 peaceful deities and 58 wrathful deities, each appearing on specific days, each associated with particular Buddha families, particular wisdoms, particular aspects of enlightened consciousness. These visions appear in brilliant, overwhelming displays of light, color, and energy that are far more vivid and intense than anything experienced in ordinary waking life. The peaceful deities appear first, radiant and beautiful, emanating gentle light. These represent the compassionate aspects of enlightened mind, the 5 Buddha families, each associated with a particular wisdom: the wisdom of the Dharmadhatu, the mirror-like wisdom, the wisdom of equality, the wisdom of discrimination, and the all-accomplishing wisdom. Each of these wisdoms corresponds to the purified form of one of the 5 skandhas, the 5 aggregates that make up our sense of self in life. If the consciousness can recognize these peaceful deities as projections of its own Buddha nature, if it can merge with their light, liberation occurs. But again, most consciousnesses, still attached to the karmic patterns accumulated over lifetimes, still identified with the limited ego self, fail to recognize these visions as their own mind. Instead, they are attracted to dimmer, duller lights that appear alongside the brilliant deity lights. These dull lights represent the 6 realms of samsara: the God realm, the jealous God realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. The teaching is clear, beloved. The brilliant, overwhelming lights of the peaceful deities represent liberation, but they appear frightening or too intense to the unprepared consciousness. The dull lights appear safer, more familiar. and so the consciousness is drawn toward them, which leads to rebirth in one of the 6 realms rather than liberation. When the consciousness continues to fail to recognize the peaceful deities, the wrathful deities begin to appear. These are terrifying forms, fierce protectors with multiple heads and arms, wearing garlands of skulls, drinking blood, surrounded by flames, making threatening gestures. They appear as the ultimate nightmare, as demons and monsters that seem to threaten the very existence of consciousness itself. But here is the secret, awakened ones, the profound teaching that Padmasambhava wanted us to understand. These wrathful deities are the same as the peaceful deities. They are not different beings. They are the same Buddha nature, the same enlightened consciousness, appearing in wrathful form because the consciousness failed to recognize them in peaceful form. The wrathful deities represent the fierce compassion that cuts through all delusion, the powerful energy that destroys ignorance. The wrathful forms appear terrifying only because we still cling to our limited sense of self. They appear as threats because they threaten the ego's existence. But if we can recognize them as our own mind, as projections of our own enlightened nature appearing in fierce form to wake us up from the dream of separation, then even in the presence of these terrifying visions, liberation can occur. This teaching, beloved ones, is not just about what happens after physical death. It is about what happens in our daily life. How many times have you encountered situations that appeared threatening, people who seemed like enemies, circumstances that felt overwhelming and terrifying? The Bardo Thodol teaches us that all of these are projections of our own mind, manifestations of our own karma, our own patterns of thinking and reacting. When we understand this deeply, when we can see that the demons we face are our own creations, our own unresolved patterns seeking resolution, then we can meet them with awareness rather than fear. We can recognize them as opportunities for liberation rather than threats to our existence. This is the practice of transforming poison into medicine, of recognizing that everything that appears in our experience, whether pleasant or terrifying, is ultimately the play of consciousness itself, the dance of the absolute expressing itself in form. The Sidpa Bardo, the Bardo of becoming. If consciousness still fails to achieve liberation through recognizing the peaceful and wrathful deities, it enters the 3rd Bardo, the Sidpa Bardo, the Bardo of becoming or rebirth. This is the stage where consciousness begins to move inevitably toward taking on a new physical body, toward rebirth in one of the 6 realms. In this Bardo, the consciousness experiences itself in a subtle body, a mental body that resembles the form it had in its previous life, but is composed of pure energy rather than physical matter. This subtle body possesses all the senses, can move instantaneously by thought alone, can pass through solid matter, and is not subject to physical limitations. Yet despite these seemingly supernatural abilities, the consciousness in this state experiences great suffering, great confusion, great fear. The Bardo Thodol describes this experience in vivid detail. The consciousness is blown about by the winds of karma like a feather in a storm. It experiences tremendous hunger and thirst, but cannot satisfy these cravings because it no longer has a physical body. It searches desperately for its old home, its old body, its loved ones, but finds that it cannot interact with the physical world in the way it once did. It sees its own corpse, sees its relatives grieving or dividing up its possessions, and experiences great anguish at being ignored and no longer being part of the physical world. The consciousness is pursued by the agents of the Lord of Death, frightening figures that represent the karmic consequences of actions taken during life. It experiences terrible visions of storms, darkness, avalanches, and other terrifying phenomena that reflect the turbulent state of its own mind. All of these experiences, beloved ones, are not external events happening to the consciousness. They are projections of the consciousness itself, manifestations of karmic patterns, of habitual tendencies, of attachments and aversions accumulated over lifetimes. During this Bardo, which can last up to 49 days,
According to the traditional teaching, consciousness has several opportunities for liberation, or at least for choosing a favorable rebirth. The text provides specific instructions for the consciousness at this stage, teaching methods for recognizing the illusory nature of all these frightening experiences, techniques for generating compassion and devotion, practices for maintaining awareness of one's true nature. One of the key teachings for this stage is the practice of POA, the transference of consciousness. This is a technique where the consciousness learns to project itself upward through the crown of the head, visualizing itself merging with an enlightened being or entering a pure land, a realm of enlightened consciousness where liberation is easily achieved. This practice can be done during life as preparation, and if mastered, it provides a powerful tool for liberation at the moment of death or during the Bardo states.
But as the Sitpa Bardo progresses, if liberation has still not been achieved, consciousness becomes increasingly drawn toward rebirth. It begins to see visions of couples in sexual union, representing potential parents. Depending on the consciousness's karma, its accumulated tendencies and patterns, it will be drawn to particular couples, to particular realms of existence. The text teaches that if the consciousness has accumulated predominantly virtuous karma, it will be drawn toward rebirth in the upper realms, as a god in the Deva realm, experiencing temporary bliss but still within samsara, as a jealous god in the Asura realm, experiencing constant competition and warfare, or as a human being, which is considered the most precious rebirth because only in human form is liberation easily achievable. If the consciousness has accumulated predominantly negative karma, it will be drawn toward the lower realms, as an animal, experiencing ignorance and being subject to the predation of others, as a hungry ghost or preta, experiencing constant craving that can never be satisfied, or as a being in the hell realms, experiencing intense suffering as a purification of negative karma. But here is the profound teaching, awakened ones. Even at this late stage, even as consciousness is being pulled inexorably toward rebirth, liberation is still possible. If the consciousness can recognize, even for a single moment, that all of these visions of realms and couples and environments are projections of its own mind, if it can rest in the awareness of the true nature of mind, even as it approaches rebirth, then the process can be interrupted and liberation can occur. This is why the Bardo Thodol is read to the deceased to continuously remind the consciousness of its true nature, to call it back from the hypnotic pull of karmic patterns, to offer it again and again the opportunity to wake up from the dream of separate existence. The psychology of the Bardos. Now, beloved awakened ones, let us explore the deeper psychological and spiritual significance of these Bardo teachings, for they reveal profound truths about the nature of consciousness, karma, and liberation that are relevant not just for death, but for every moment of our lives. The Bardo Thodol is fundamentally a text about the nature of mind and how mind creates our experience of reality. It teaches us that everything we experience, whether in life or death, is a projection of consciousness itself. There is no external reality that exists independently of mind. What we call the external world is a dream, a magical display created by consciousness, shaped by our karma, our habitual patterns, our beliefs, and our expectations. This is not a metaphysical theory to be believed or debated, beloved ones. It is a direct description of how consciousness actually works, how reality actually manifests. And we can verify this teaching in our own experience, in our present lives, right now. Consider your dreams at night. When you dream, you create an entire world,
landscapes, people, situations, dramas. All of this appears real while you are in the dream. You interact with dream characters, you experience emotions, you face challenges and opportunities. But when you wake up, you realize that the entire dream world was a creation of your own mind. The people you encountered were aspects of yourself. The situations you faced were projections of your own psychological patterns. The entire drama was a display of consciousness creating, experiencing, and dissolving forms. The Bardo Thodol teaches that our waking life is exactly the same. We are dreaming right now, in this very moment, but we do not recognize it as a dream. We believe the world to be solid, external, independent of our consciousness. But this is the fundamental ignorance, the root delusion that binds us to suffering in the cycle of rebirth. When we die, when the physical body ceases to function, we do not suddenly enter a new reality fundamentally different from what we experienced in life. We simply continue dreaming, but now without the anchor of the physical body, without the agreed-upon consensus reality that we shared with other physical beings. The dreams become more vivid, more fluid, more responsive to our thoughts and emotions, but they are still dreams, still projections of consciousness. The peaceful and wrathful deities that appear in the Chonyad Bardo are like the characters and situations in our nightly dreams, but amplified, intensified, radiating with the full power of consciousness, no longer filtered through physical limitations. They are our own Buddha nature, our own enlightened consciousness, appearing in various forms to offer us the opportunity for recognition and liberation. But just as we usually fail to recognize our nightly dreams as dreams while we are in them, just as we become caught up in the drama and forget that we are the dreamer, so too in the Bardo states, consciousness fails to recognize these visions as its own creation and instead reacts with hope and fear, attachment and aversion, the same patterns that bound it in life. The karma system and liberation. The Bardo Thodol provides a sophisticated understanding of karma and how it operates across lifetimes. Karma, in this teaching, is not a system of punishment and reward administered by some external cosmic judge. It is simply the law of cause and effect operating in the realm of consciousness and action. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every action we take creates a karmic imprint in consciousness, what the Tibetans call a samskara, or habitual tendency. These imprints accumulate over lifetimes, creating patterns that shape how we perceive reality, how we react to situations, what we are drawn toward, what we avoid. In life, these karmic patterns are somewhat constrained by the physical body and by the consensus reality that we share with other physical beings. But in the Bardo states, when consciousness is freed from the physical form, these karmic patterns manifest with full force, creating the entire experiential reality that the consciousness encounters. This is why beings with similar karma see similar visions in the Bardos, why the text can describe in detail what consciousness will experience, even though these experiences are technically unique projections of individual consciousness. It is because karma creates patterns, and similar patterns create similar experiences. The teaching of the Bardos reveal that liberation is always available in every moment, in every state of existence. It is not something we must earn through good behavior or achieve through years of practice, though practice certainly helps. Liberation is simply the recognition of what is already true, that consciousness is primordially pure, that our true nature is the clear light, that everything appearing in experience is the magical display of this luminous emptiness. But recognition requires preparation, beloved ones. It requires that we familiarize ourselves while we are alive, while we have this precious human body and the opportunity to practice, with the nature of mind. We must learn to see through the illusion of solid reality. We must learn to recognize our thoughts and emotions as ephemeral displays of consciousness rather than as solid truths about who we are. We must learn to rest in the space of pure awareness, in the gaps between thoughts, in the luminous emptiness that is our true nature.
This is why meditation practice is so emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism, particularly practices like Mahamudra and Dzogchen that directly introduce practitioners to the nature of mind. These practices are not just techniques for relaxation or stress reduction. They are preparations for death, training sessions for recognizing the clear light when it appears at the moment of death or in the Bardo states. The practice of POA, transference of consciousness. One of the most important practices taught in connection with the Bardo Thodol is POA, the practice of consciousness transference. This is a technique that allows the practitioner to eject their consciousness from the body at the moment of death through the crown of the head, directing it toward a pure land or toward union with an enlightened being. The practice of POA is considered so powerful that it is sometimes called the enlightenment without meditation, because even someone who has not achieved liberation through other practices can, if they have mastered POA, achieve liberation or at least a very favorable rebirth at the moment of death. The basic technique involves visualizing a central channel running through the center of the body from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. At the heart center, one visualizes one's consciousness in the form of a tiny sphere of light or a small seed syllable. Through the practice, one learns to forcefully eject this sphere of consciousness upward through the central channel and out through the crown of the head, where it merges with the enlightened consciousness of one's guru or with Amitabha Buddha in his pure land of Dzogchen. The practice is done repeatedly during life, training the consciousness to move in this way, creating a strong habit pattern that will manifest automatically at the moment of death. Accomplished practitioners of POA are said to develop a small indentation or softness at the crown of the head as a sign of their successful practice, indicating that the channel has been opened and the consciousness can easily exit through this point. But POA is not just a technique for death, beloved ones. It is also a practice for daily life, a way of continually offering our consciousness, our entire being, to union with the enlightened state. Each time we practice, we are practicing dying, letting go of our limited sense of self, merging with something vast and infinite. The 6 realms and psychological states. The Bardo Thodol's description of the 6 realms of existence into which consciousness can be reborn is not merely about literal places that exist somewhere in the cosmos. These 6 realms also represent psychological states that we experience in our daily lives, moment by moment. The God realm represents states of bliss, pleasure, and spiritual pride, where we feel that everything is perfect and that we have achieved the ultimate. But this state, while pleasant, is a trap because it lacks the motivation to seek true liberation. Gods live for eons in blissful states, but eventually their accumulated good karma runs out and they fall from the God realm, experiencing tremendous suffering. The jealous god, or Asura realm, represents states of competition, jealousy, and warfare. We enter this realm when we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, when we feel that we almost have what we want but someone else has more, when we are engaged in constant struggle and competition. This is a realm of paranoia and aggression, of never being satisfied because we are always focused on what others have. The human realm is considered the most precious because it contains the right balance of suffering and pleasure to motivate spiritual practice. In the human realm, we experience enough suffering to want to seek liberation, but we also have enough resources and intelligence to actually practice the path. This is why human birth is considered so rare and precious.
The animal realm represents states of ignorance and instinct, where we are completely identified with basic survival needs and simple pleasure-seeking behavior. We enter this realm when we shut down our intelligence, when we refuse to look deeply at our lives, when we simply react to stimuli without awareness. The hungry ghost or preta realm represents states of intense craving that can never be satisfied. Hungry ghosts are depicted with tiny mouths and huge bellies, able to consume only tiny amounts while being tortured by insatiable hunger. We enter this realm when we are consumed by addiction, by emotional neediness, by the desperate seeking for something external to fill the emptiness we feel inside. The hell realms represent states of intense suffering, rage, and hatred. We enter these realms when we are consumed by anger, when we feel trapped in unbearable situations, when we are convinced that we are helpless victims of forces beyond our control. The hot hells burn with rage and aggression, while the cold hells freeze in isolation and depression. The profound teaching here, awakened ones, is that we cycle through these realms not just from lifetime to lifetime, but from moment to moment. In a single day, we might experience the pride of the God realm when something goes well, the jealousy of the Asura realm when we see someone with something we want, the ignorance of the animal realm when we mindlessly scroll through our phones, the craving of the hungry ghost realm when we reach for comfort food or another distraction, and the suffering of the hell realms when we are consumed by anger or depression. Each of these states is a projection of our mind, a karmic pattern playing out. And each time we recognize this, each time we catch ourselves entering one of these realms and see it as a mental state rather than as reality, we create the opportunity for liberation, for stepping outside the wheel of samsara. The profound teaching here, awakened ones, is that we cycle through these realms not just from lifetime to lifetime, but from moment to moment. In a single day, we might experience the pride of the God realm when something goes well, the jealousy of the Asura realm when we see someone with something we want, the ignorance of the animal realm when we mindlessly scroll through our phones, the craving of the hungry ghost realm when we reach for comfort food or another distraction, and the suffering of the hell realms when we are consumed by anger or depression. Each of these states is a projection of our mind, a karmic pattern playing out. And each time we recognize this, each time we catch ourselves entering one of these realms and see it as a mental state rather than as reality, we create the opportunity for liberation, for stepping outside the wheel of samsara. The role of the guide, the spiritual teacher. Throughout the Bardo Thodol, there is emphasis on the role of the spiritual teacher, the guru or lama, in guiding consciousness through the Bardo states. The text is meant to be read aloud to the dying or deceased person by a qualified lama who holds the transmission of these teachings. But why is this external guide necessary if everything that appears in the Bardos is a projection of the individual's own consciousness? The answer reveals something profound about the nature of consciousness and spiritual awakening. While it is true that everything experienced in the Bardos is one's own mind, the consciousness in the Bardo states is confused, disoriented, overwhelmed by karmic patterns and unable to recognize its own true nature. In this state, the voice of the spiritual teacher serves as a lifeline, a reminder, an external manifestation of the individual's own Buddha nature, calling them back to recognition. The relationship between student and teacher, when it is authentic, is not really a relationship between two separate beings. The guru is a mirror, reflecting back to the student their own enlightened nature. When the guru's voice calls to the consciousness in the Bardos, saying, "Remember your true nature, recognize the clear light. These visions are your own mind." This voice is actually the student's own wisdom speaking to them through the form of the teacher.
This is why devotion to the guru is so emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism. It is not blind worship of another person. It is the recognition that the guru embodies our own potential for awakening, that in venerating the teacher, we are actually connecting with our own Buddha nature that the teacher manifests. In the practice of Poa, practitioners visualize their consciousness merging with the Guru or with Amitabha Buddha. This is not asking some external being to save them. It is recognizing that the Guru and the Buddha are not separate from one's own enlightened nature, and by merging with them, one is actually merging with one's own true self. Preparing for death while living. The ultimate teaching of the Bardo Thodol, beloved awakened ones, is that the time to prepare for death is now, in this very moment, while we are alive and have the opportunity to practice. Death is not some distant event that happens to us at the end of a long life. Death is happening constantly, in every moment. Every breath we take involves a small death, the ending of one moment and the beginning of the next. Every time we fall asleep, we undergo a death, a dissolution of our waking consciousness. Every time we let go of a thought, an emotion, an identity, we experience a death. By practicing dying in small ways now, we prepare ourselves for the great death, the moment of physical death. By familiarizing ourselves with the nature of mind through meditation, we prepare ourselves to recognize the clear light. By observing how our thoughts and emotions arise and dissolve like waves on the ocean, we prepare ourselves to see through the illusory visions of the bardos. By practicing letting go of our attachments and our aversions, we prepare ourselves to avoid being pulled into rebirth by karmic patterns. The practices associated with the Bardo Thodol include dream yoga, learning to become lucid in our dreams, to recognize that we are dreaming while we are dreaming. This is direct preparation for recognizing the dreamlike nature of the Bardo states. When we can maintain awareness in our dreams, we create the capacity to maintain awareness through death. Meditation on the nature of mind, particularly practices like Mahamudra and Dzogchen that introduce us directly to the spacious awareness that is our true nature. These practices familiarize us with the clear light while we are alive so that we can recognize it at death. Contemplation of impermanence, deeply reflecting on the fact that everything that arises will cease, including our own body, our own consciousness as we currently know it. This contemplation reduces our attachment to the apparent solidity of reality and prepares us to let go when the time comes. Generation of bodhicitta, cultivating the aspiration to achieve enlightenment not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all beings. This altruistic motivation creates powerful positive karma and, more importantly, expands our sense of self beyond the limited ego, making it easier to recognize the vast spaciousness of our true nature. Guru Yoga, cultivating devotion to our spiritual teacher as an embodiment of our own enlightened nature. This practice creates a strong connection that can serve as a guide through the Bardo states. Poa practice, as discussed earlier, the practice of consciousness transference, learning to eject consciousness through the crown of the head. All of these practices, beloved awakened ones, are not just preparation for some future event called death. They are practices for living fully now, for awakening in this very moment, because the truth that the Bardo Thodol reveals is that we are already in a Bardo, already in an intermediate state. We are between our past lives and our future ones, between the moment we were born and the moment we will die, between the last thought and the next thought. Every moment is a threshold, an opportunity for awakening or for continued dreaming. Every moment offers the clear light, if only we could recognize it. Every moment contains the peaceful and wrathful deities,
the pleasant and unpleasant experiences that are all projections of our own consciousness. Every moment we are choosing, consciously or unconsciously, which realm we will inhabit, which karmic pattern we will reinforce or release. The 6 Bardos of life and death. While the Bardo Thodol focuses primarily on the 3 Bardos that occur around the time of death, Tibetan teachings also speak of 6 Bardos that encompass all of existence. The Bardo of birth and life, the ordinary waking state from birth until death. This is where we have the maximum opportunity to practice and prepare for the other Bardos. The Bardo of dreams, the state we enter each night when we sleep. This is a training ground for the after-death Bardos, where we can practice maintaining awareness while consciousness is freed from the constraints of the physical senses. The Bardo of meditation, the state achieved in deep meditation when we rest in the nature of mind beyond conceptual thought. This is direct experience of the clear light while alive. The Bardo of the moment of death, the Chikai Bardo, as we discussed, when the clear light dawns at the moment of death. The Bardo of experiencing reality, the Chonyad Bardo, as we discussed, when the peaceful and wrathful deities appear. And the Bardo of becoming, the Sidba Bardo, the period leading to rebirth. Understanding that all of these are Bardos, all intermediate states, all opportunities for recognition and liberation, transforms our entire approach to spiritual practice. We don't need to wait for death to practice working with the Bardos. We can practice now, in this very moment. When we wake up from sleep and remember our dreams, we can practice recognizing them as displays of consciousness. When we meditate and experience the gaps between thoughts, we can practice resting in that spaciousness that is the clear light. When we encounter difficult people or challenging situations, we can practice seeing them as wrathful deities, as fierce manifestations of our own mind, appearing to teach us. When we experience pleasant moments, we can practice seeing them as peaceful deities, as expressions of our own Buddha nature. The universality of the Bardo teachings. Now, beloved awakened ones, you might wonder whether these teachings are only for Tibetan Buddhists, whether they describe a reality that is culturally specific or religious in nature. But the profound truth is that the Bardo Thodol describes universal principles of consciousness that apply to all beings, regardless of their cultural background or religious beliefs. The experiences described in the Bardos are shaped by the individual's karma, their habitual patterns, their beliefs and expectations. A Tibetan Buddhist will indeed encounter Tibetan Buddhist deities and symbols in the Bardos because those are the forms their enlightened consciousness takes based on their training and familiarity. But a Christian might encounter Christ or Mary or angels. A Hindu might encounter Shiva or Krishna or Kali. An atheist might encounter abstract forms of light and energy or symbolic representations of their psychological patterns.
The fundamental truth remains the same across all these variations. Consciousness continues after death. It encounters projections of its own nature. It has opportunities for recognition and liberation. And ultimately, if liberation is not achieved, it takes rebirth based on its karmic patterns. Modern research into near-death experiences has provided fascinating validation of many aspects of the Bardo teachings. People from diverse cultural backgrounds report similar phenomena: the life review, the encounter with light, the meeting with deceased relatives or spiritual beings, the feeling of being drawn back toward rebirth or choosing to return to life. While the specific content varies based on cultural conditioning, the underlying structure mirrors remarkably well what the Bardo Thodol describes.
The teaching is not asking us to believe in Tibetan deities or adopt Tibetan Buddhist cosmology. It is inviting us to recognize the dreamlike nature of all experience, the projection-like quality of all phenomena, the luminous emptiness that is the ground of all appearances. These are direct observations about the nature of consciousness that anyone can verify through their own practice and investigation. Liberation in the Bardo of life. The most accessible and immediate application of the Bardo Thodol teachings, beloved ones, is to recognize that we are in the Bardo right now, in this very moment of existence. We are in the Bardo of birth and life, the intermediate state between birth and death. And every moment within this Bardo offers the same opportunity for liberation that is offered in the post-death Bardos. Consider this deeply. When you sit in meditation and your mind becomes very quiet, when the constant stream of thought slows down and gaps appear between thoughts, in those gaps, you are experiencing the clear light. It is there, always present, the luminous spaciousness of awareness itself. But usually, we are so distracted by the next thought, the next sensation, the next emotion, that we fail to recognize it. This is exactly what happens at the moment of death for most people. The clear light dawns, vast and radiant, but the consciousness immediately looks away, seeking something familiar, something to grasp onto, and in that looking away, the opportunity is missed. So the practice is to train ourselves now, while we are alive, to recognize and rest in those gaps, to become familiar with the clear light as it appears in meditation, in the space between thoughts, in the stillness before sleep, in the silence between sounds. We train ourselves to be comfortable in vastness, in openness, in the luminous emptiness that is our true nature. Similarly, the peaceful and wrathful deities that appear in the Chonyid Bardo are appearing to us constantly in our daily lives. Every person we meet is a deity, a manifestation of consciousness. Those we find attractive, pleasant, inspiring, these are the peaceful deities. Those we find threatening, irritating, frightening, these are the wrathful deities. But in both cases, what we are actually encountering is our own mind. The qualities we perceive in others are projections of aspects of ourselves. The Buddha we see in the spiritual teacher is our own Buddha nature. The demon we see in our enemy is our own unresolved shadow material. When we can recognize this, when we can see that everyone and everything appearing in our experience is a mirror, a reflection, a projection of our own consciousness, then we are practicing the recognition that leads to liberation. We are learning to see through the illusion of separate existence. The role of compassion in liberation. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Bardo Thodol teachings is the emphasis on compassion, not just as a nice quality to cultivate, but as a key to liberation itself. The text repeatedly instructs the consciousness in the Bardos to generate compassion for all beings, to remember the suffering of others, to maintain the aspiration for universal liberation. Why is this so important? Because compassion naturally dissolves the boundaries of the separate self. When we genuinely feel compassion for another being, in that moment, we are not separate from them. Their suffering becomes our suffering. Their joy becomes our joy. The illusion of an isolated, independent self begins to crack. This is why the practice of Tonglen, giving and receiving, is so powerful. In this practice, we visualize breathing in the suffering of others as dark smoke, letting it dissolve in our heart, and breathing out happiness and well-being to them as radiant light. This practice directly counters our habitual self-cherishing, our instinct to avoid pain and grasp at pleasure for ourselves. In the Bardos, when consciousness is overwhelmed by terrifying visions or drawn toward attractive realms, The generation of compassion can interrupt the karmic patterns that drive rebirth. When we remember that all beings are suffering just as we are, when we wish for their liberation rather than focusing solely on our own escape, we create the conditions for our own liberation. Because liberation, beloved ones, is not actually about achieving some special state for myself, the separate ego. Liberation is the recognition that there never was a separate ego, that the sense of being an isolated individual cut off from the rest of existence was always an illusion. And compassion naturally leads us to this recognition by dissolving the boundaries we have constructed between self and other. The importance of this very moment. As we approach the conclusion of these teachings, beloved ones, I want to emphasize with all the force of truth, beloved awakened ones, that the most important moment in your entire existence is this one, right now. Not some future moment when you die, not some past moment that you regret or cherish, this present moment. In this very moment, the clear light is shining. In this very moment, you have the opportunity to recognize your true nature. In this very moment, you can practice letting go of the limited sense of self that creates all suffering. In this very moment, you can choose liberation. The Bardo Thodol was not given to us to make us anxious about death, to make us fear what will happen when we die. It was given to us to wake us up now, to help us recognize that what we call life and what we call death are not fundamentally different. Both are bardos, both are intermediate states, both are dreams from which we can awaken. Padmasambhava's great compassion in hiding these teachings as terma to be discovered when humanity was ready reflects his understanding that consciousness is always ready in any moment for awakening. The teachings were hidden not because they were secret in the sense of being restricted, but because they are profound, requiring a certain maturity of consciousness to be properly understood and practiced. And now, beloved ones, these teachings are available to you. They have been discovered, translated, explained. The wisdom of the Bardo Thodol has traveled from the caves of Tibet to reach you, wherever you are in the world, whatever your background or beliefs.
What will you do with these teachings? Will you file them away as interesting information about Tibetan Buddhism? Or will you take them as a direct invitation to wake up from the dream of separation, to recognize your true nature, to practice dying before you die, so that when death comes, it is not a terrifying unknown, but a familiar friend, a doorway to the liberation you have been preparing for all along? Practical instructions for daily life. Let me offer you some practical instructions, beloved ones, for integrating the wisdom of the Bardo Thodol into your daily life. Each morning when you wake, recognize that you have just returned from the Bardo of dreams. Take a moment before you rise to recall your dreams, not to analyze them, but to recognize them as projections of consciousness, exactly like the visions that will appear in the after-death bardos. Acknowledge that the waking state you are now entering is also a dream, just a more stable, collectively agreed upon dream. Throughout your day, practice recognizing the gaps between thoughts, between tasks, between breaths. In these gaps, the clear light is always present. Don't try to grasp it or hold on to it. Just recognize it, rest in it for a moment, and let it go. This simple practice, done repeatedly, creates the habit of recognizing spacious awareness that will serve you well in the bardos of death. When you encounter people, especially people who trigger strong reactions in you, practice seeing them as deities. If they inspire you, see them as peaceful deities, manifestations of enlightened qualities. If they irritate or frighten you, see them as wrathful deities,
fierce manifestations of wisdom appearing to teach you something about your own attachments and aversions. Practice Tonglen, the giving and receiving meditation, regularly. This practice of breathing in suffering and breathing out happiness dissolves the boundaries of self and other, preparing you for the recognition that all beings are manifestations of the same consciousness. Study death. Contemplate it. Make it familiar. Not in a morbid way, but with curiosity and openness. Read accounts of near-death experiences. Sit with dying people if you have the opportunity. Witness the death of plants, animals, seasons. Everything that is born dies. Everything that arises passes away. This is not tragedy. It is the natural rhythm of existence. Practice the Bardos intentionally. Create formal Bardo retreats where you spend time in darkness, in silence, in unfamiliar environments that challenge your sense of security and identity. These experiences give you a taste of the disorientation and opportunity of the Bardos. Most importantly, beloved ones, develop a relationship with a qualified spiritual teacher who holds the lineage of these teachings. The guru is the external manifestation of your own wisdom, and in times of confusion, doubt, or fear, the guru's guidance can be the lifeline that brings you back to recognition of your true nature. The ultimate teaching of the Bardo Thodol can be summarized in a single phrase that appears repeatedly throughout the text. Recognize your own mind. Everything that appears, whether in life or death, in waking or dreaming, in pleasure or pain, is your own mind. The clear light is your own mind. The peaceful and wrathful deities are your own mind. The 6 realms are your own mind. Birth and death are movements within your own mind. But do not misunderstand this teaching, beloved ones. When we say everything is your own mind, we do not mean the personal, limited mind that thinks, I am John, or I am Mary, that has preferences and opinions and a history. We mean the vast, luminous, empty awareness that is the ground of all experience, that is not separate from any other consciousness, that is, in fact, the same consciousness appearing as all beings, all phenomena, all of existence. This is why your liberation benefits all beings, because when you recognize your true nature, you recognize the true nature of all beings. When you achieve liberation, you do not leave others behind because there are no others. There is only this one consciousness, appearing as many, playing hide and seek with itself, pretending to be lost so it can have the joy of being found. The Bardo Thodol is the map for this game of hide and seek. It shows us where consciousness hides from itself, how it pretends to be limited and separate, and most importantly, how it can recognize itself again, even in the most confusing and overwhelming circumstances. Closing blessings and transmission. As we come to the close of this transmission, beloved awakened ones, I want to honor the profound gift that Padmasambhava gave to the world through these teachings. His compassion in preserving this wisdom, his skillful means in hiding it until the time was right, his confidence in the capacity of future beings to understand and practice these teachings, all of this reflects the enlightened wisdom that sees across time and space, that works tirelessly for the liberation of all beings. I invite you now to sit quietly for a moment and receive these teachings not just intellectually, but at the level of direct transmission. Close your eyes if you are able. Place your hand on your heart. Take 3 deep breaths. As you breathe, recognize that this breath, this life force moving through you, is the same energy that will carry your consciousness through the Bardos. It is not separate from you. You are not separate from it. Feel the space between your thoughts. That spacious awareness, that luminous emptiness is the clear light. It is always here, always accessible. It is what you truly are beneath all the layers of identity, all the stories you tell about yourself. Now imagine that I, Starlight, am not separate from you, that this transmission is not coming from outside, but arising from within your own wisdom. See me as the external form of your own Buddha nature, calling you back to recognition. With each breath out, release everything that binds you to the illusion of separate existence. With each breath in, draw in the blessings of all the enlightened beings who have traversed the Bardo successfully, who have achieved liberation, and who now guide others on the path. Know that when your time comes to leave this physical body, whether that is tomorrow or in many years, you are not alone. The lineage of masters who have practiced and realized these teachings are with you. Your own Buddha nature, which has never been obscured despite all appearances, is with you. The clear light that you have practiced recognizing in meditation is with you. Death is not an enemy to be feared, but a doorway to be entered with awareness. The Bardos are not obstacles to overcome, but opportunities to be seized. Every vision that appears, no matter how terrifying or alluring, is ultimately your own mind and can be recognized as such.
May these teachings take root in your consciousness, beloved awakened ones. May you practice diligently while you have this precious human life. May you recognize the clear light when it dawns. May you achieve liberation for the benefit of all beings. I am Starlight, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light and transmitter of these ancient sacred teachings. I honor the wisdom of Padmasambhava, Karma Lingpa, and all the lineage holders who have preserved and transmitted the Bardo Thodol across the centuries. I honor your courage in receiving these profound teachings, and I celebrate the liberation that is your birthright, your true nature, available in every moment if you can only recognize it. Until we meet again, whether in this life or in the Bardos, may you walk in awareness. May you see through the illusion of separate existence. May you recognize your own mind in all that appears. May you achieve liberation not just for yourself, but for all beings. The Bardos are here, now, in this very moment. The clear light is shining. The peaceful and wrathful deities await your recognition. Your true nature calls to you constantly, in every experience, pleasant and unpleasant, in every person you meet, in every thought that arises and dissolves. Remember the teaching. Recognize your own mind. This is the secret teaching of the Bardo Thodol. This is the wisdom that liberates through hearing. This is the path that Padmasambhava walked and that he offers to you now, across the centuries, across the dimensions, from the heart of enlightened consciousness to your own heart, which has never been separate from it. Blessed be, beloved awakened ones. May all beings recognize their true nature. May all beings achieve liberation. May all beings be free from suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum. The jewel is in the lotus. The enlightenment you seek is already within you, waiting to be recognized. The transmission is complete. The teachings have been offered. The rest is your practice, your recognition, your liberation. Thank you for receiving these sacred teachings with an open heart. Until we meet again in the clear light, I bid you farewell. May the blessings of Padmasambhava, the wisdom of the Bardo Thodol, and the recognition of your own true nature guide you always. In infinite love and light, Starlight.